Existence endures because simples are immutable.
So I think I finally solved the problem, and it's largely in part because of you. Um, so remember that before I talked to you, I had this idea of closing off this Cartesian postulate, right? The Cartesian postulate that separate substances, let's say in dualism, the idea that supernatural and natural substances cannot interact precisely because they are different, right? And the assumption is that actually you would require commonality of substance or commonality of properties between substances in order to enable interaction. The assumption is that it is commonality of properties that enables interaction and not difference of properties. But I had challenged that by pointing out that well in the first place, it is in fact we have counter evidence, and we have always had counter evidence against that, in the form of the knowledge that actually interaction requires that both of the entities involved in the interaction remain separate throughout, and that they remain distinct. Otherwise, if they unified into a singleton substance, then they wouldn't be able to interact with one another. They would simply become one entity, and they would confront the rest of the world as a whole, right? And so interaction requires the persistent maintenance of difference throughout the interaction. That's just at the level of mere categories. It was always obvious that this was something that we should have known. And then there were other arguments I put forward. I don't remember what those were, but the ideal thing would be if I remember them, but it doesn't. Anyway, the point is, and then you asked me, you pushed me a bit further, because I hadn't actually thought of this before you asked me. You asked me, what if someone just kind of proposes, and the net effect of all of that was to say that, well, it is not similarity that makes similarity of substance, or sameness of substance more specifically, that makes interaction possible, but it is instead difference. Difference is what enables interaction, because sameness of substance would lead to merging. They would merge together, right? And that wouldn't be an interaction, it would just be unison into a whole. And then you asked me, let me try to remember the exact question you asked me, and it prompted me to have to answer. And yeah. So you asked me in the channel here, you also asked me in voice and stuff, you asked me like 3 times similar questions, and I had to refine it each time, So you said, the point of contention, I'm looking at this message here. In our call, I missed something important. When I asked you how you can definitively prove a non-localized being, you said that there are at least two beings that exist and must have a spatial relationship. The point of contention is to be used to be present, I realized. Yes. So I was using this notion of interaction being enabled by difference to then further make the claim that difference commits entities to interacting, that they must interact when they have different substances. And the reasoning I was using for that was decent, but it wasn't complete. I was saying that in effect, difference. I started off with the proof that all things that exist are discrete, single-valued substances, discrete and homogeneous substances, and that's something I proved with some other chain of reasoning. And then I said, well, I also then proved that all substances, all fundamental substances, are substantially unique. They differ from one another in their fundamental nature, their homogeneous fundamental nature. And so there's nothing in common among them at the substance properties level. And then I used that to say, well, because they are substantially unique and everything that exists is a homogeneous, substantially unique substance, and because difference enables interaction, therefore all things must interact. But that wasn't sufficient. I didn't have the final piece, which was saying that I was saying that difference enables interaction. And then I also had a kind of a parallel statement, which was that that similarity disables interaction, right? Now, if you take both of these together, you could say that they are exhaustive and say, well, because sameness disables interaction and difference enables interaction, then, well, there is no alternative, therefore it must be the case that difference also necessitates interaction, right? But you can't do that. That's an unjustified leap. All I had was sameness disables interaction, difference enables interaction, but I did not have difference necessitates interaction. I didn't have the third bit. And you asked me this question. You asked me several times in several different ways. You asked me, basically, you kept pressing me on, like, how is it that I come to the conclusion that difference necessitates interaction, right? And so you kind of, you asked me during a call, you asked me something like, it was something along the lines of, well, why can't they just overlap? Or why can't someone just say that there is a different realm of existence wherein the things in that realm simply don't and can't interact with the substances in our realm? And I was forced to think on the spot, and I said, well, if I think about it, the differentiating relationship is a relationship, and relationships are themselves also forms of identity. They have their own natures, which are owed to the natures of the entities which are engaged in the relation. And so a relation of one kind will behave the same way everywhere that it occurs. Because if you say that a relation of some kind behaves, that if you say that entities which are engaged in a relationship of this kind behave differently every time that they enter into that relationship, then you are saying that that relationship has both a certain nature and also a nature which is opposed to that very nature. It's a contradiction, right? You're saying that this relation brings about this behavior and some other kind of behavior at a different point, even when the relationship itself, in other words, the entities involved in the relationship, are of identical kinds. You're saying these two entities have the same kind of nature, and so when they interact, they enter into a relationship of a kind which is unique to their joint natures. And then you're saying that, well, that same kind of relationship yields different behavior under the same circumstances. When I say circumstances, I don't mean to refer to time, but I mean rather to refer to the nature of the entities that are juxtaposed and that are engaging and that are forming the relationship, right? So it's not a temporal reference there. When I say circumstances, I mean only to refer to the nature of the surrounding entities and the way that they are disposed or the way that they are oriented toward one another. And so I kind of realized that the difference relation is a kind of relation which commits it to having a particular nature, and that nature must be the same across each instance of that relation. And that if you deny that, you would be engaged in a contradiction. And so that was the missing piece. It allowed me to say that